Yo, what's going on guys? Arekkz here, welcome back to another video for Godfall, and today we are doing something that you guys have been asking for because you want to know what we think about the game. I'm joined by the full team today, TwoSixNine, Paradise Central and Vestmore, because we've all been playing through the game in different configurations. I played through the whole game solo, these guys have played through the whole game co-op, and a lot of you guys have been asking, what do we think? And where do we sort of stand on the game? So we are going to be reviewing it today, talking about the aspects that we like, talking about the aspects that we don't like, and just trying to sort of give you a picture as to how we feel about this launch title. I'm going to kick things off by talking about one of the aspects that I really enjoy in the game, and then of course we will go on to talk about the things that we think need to be improved, things that kind of didn't land so well. So I think one of the things that I want to kind of like start off with is I just want to kind of jump straight into combat, because I feel like one of the things that will hit you initially when you start the game, like you get dropped into the tutorial, which to be honest the tutorial doesn't really do the greatest job of introducing you to the game because you don't get all the cool stuff early on, so you don't necessarily get the full picture. But I feel like combat is one of the things that for anybody that has played the game or seen it so far, this is the thing that they connect with the most, because the combat and the moment-to-moment gameplay is the thing that is most satisfying. It's the thing that I enjoy a lot of the time. It's kind of just the thing that ultimately keeps me playing, keeps me coming back. So I kind of want to sort of touch on like combat to begin with. So like, where do you sort of stand on the combat front?
I'm gonna jump in. So I think the combat is one of the better things about the game. However, that isn't to say that it doesn't have its own issues and it isn't a little bit clunky. And when I say that, my personal gripe with the combat is the fact that you can't like animation cancel, and it doesn't always feel as fluid as I want it to. However, it is still satisfying, and certain attacks do feel quite like weighty and nice, but it still isn't everything I want the combat to be, but it is a part of the game that shines, particularly at the end game, which I think we'll talk about what the end game is like later on. But at the end game, when your build comes into play, that's when the combat gets at its best, I would say. Yeah,
I think one of the important things to kind of touch on initially is that, if you jump straight into the tutorial, like before you go any further, like a lot of it's quite interesting. You're used to these kind of games being in a position where you unlock abilities. That's fair enough. But in this one, you have to kind of spend the first, say, 5 skill points to unlock even some of your basic combo paths. So I feel like right in the tutorial, you're not even introduced to the best possible permutation of the weapons. And pair that with the fact that one thing, the one kind of gripe that I did have right off the bat that I did, like as soon as I jumped into, lock-on in this game, I feel like lock-on might as well not exist, because it doesn't function in a way that you're used to in action games. Like I'm used to, if I'm locked onto a character and then I attack, I get dragged towards that character. Like it doesn't work like that in this game. So I've kind of my first like hour or two with the game was definitely having to get used to like my positioning and noting the fact that I actually have to physically turn myself to do that. But once you kind of get into those flows, like I personally like the flow of like smashing a load of things with like a huge AoE hammer and then switching over to like a super fast sword. I mean, like Vest, I know you're you're the dual blades man in every single game that there is. Like how are you on combat?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, really. Like, just for anyone who doesn't know, like, I'm someone who really enjoys like melee combat systems in games. So I used to play quite a bit of Jedi Academy. I like those kind of like sword slasher games like Mordhau and Chivalry, and this game was certainly an interesting one. I think much like everyone here, I had a bit of an issue with the combat at first. It's super clunky. You're very much like locked into what the game gives you, like Paradise says, there's no animation cancelling, which would have been nice. But I think like when you do unlock most of the things, I was having a good time with it. You do have a lot of options. There's a lot of really cool stuff you can do. But yeah, I would say my main gripe with the combat was definitely everything being locked out at the beginning. It felt very stifling, especially coming from like Ghost of Tsushima, like where you can parry someone and you just get so much out parrying somebody. It's like you're gonna instantly kill that very hard mob or something. In this, like right at the beginning, at least, when you don't have any like parry upgrades unlocked, you parry someone and you're just kind of like, you're like, okay, I get like one free hit on them, that's it. I do have to give props. I think the boys did cover like most of the stuff that I did want to say, but I do have to give props to the innovation of kind of melee combat stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff that is kind of cool, like the polarity attacks, the sort of like different systems like that. Essentially, like the weak point kind of system was an interesting concept to me. But I will say certain things didn't really mesh too well. Like for instance, the timing attacks, I felt I didn't really use too much. But they were an option, and there's something you can do if they were a bit niche for me. But I would say overall, combat is definitely weighty. Bit of a disappointment at the start, but yeah, if you do get to that end game, which we'll cover in a sec, it gets a bit better. So yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, I guess outside of combat, because it's one of the things. It's like we sort of mentioned in previous games before as well. Like moment-to-moment combat is one of the things that will ultimately keep you playing and having fun. But obviously, outside of that, you need the content to do that. So I guess let's talk a little bit about the content, because this is where the game is definitely falling short a little bit. And respectfully, I understand trying to develop a game during this current climate is definitely going to be no easy task, but. It is definitely one of those things that, you can blitz through the story incredibly quickly and be it like, quote unquote endgame within a matter of hours, right? So, you've got 3 maps to go through. You have the Earth realm, you have the Water realm, and then you have the Air realm. And most of those have, I guess, comparably speaking, like a Monster Hunter style, like you select your mission, you load into it, go into it, do what you need to do, and then you come back out. But some of those can be incredibly quick to the point where you do feel like you're blitzing through the content at like breakneck speed without even having to try to rush it. So I think that does then expose the fact that, there is kind of a lack of content beyond that point, right? I don't know, like 2Six, do you want to speak to like content a bit? Because this is one of the sort of things that you were speaking about before.
Oh, let's talk about content in this game. So, like, the content in itself and, like, the lore and, like, the whole world and stuff, like, the actual experience that you have with the content is great. There just isn't enough of it. So even during the campaign, they have like this cool epic world which is kind of like grandiose and all of that, but there's only really like 2 or 3 characters that you experience during the whole story. So if we had like a more, and it was basically all set in like a single room, essentially, the story, aside from like the initial cutscene, which was really cool, and the end and all the other cutscenes that go into like the game and stuff like that. So content is a big thing that keeps people playing, and if you're going to make a game such as like a looter game, then you need more of that broad, varied environment that people want to play in, essentially. And that game. And this game didn't necessarily have that in like the amount of depth that I would want over a long period of time. That doesn't mean I didn't enjoy my time playing and my experience playing through it. It definitely, I just wanted more of it. I think that this game has like some sick mechanics, and if it just had more content, it would actually be really, really good.
Yeah. That definitely like hits the nail on the head. I mean, we do know that they have like a DLC. Coming next year. We obviously don't know necessarily whether that will fix the issue, but that will of course start to expand the world, at least from that point. But yeah, I think that is definitely the thing, because you kind of get to that point, especially like midway through, as you kind of get in towards the end game. Like basically, what your kind of moment-to-moment activity choices are, like either the hunt missions, which are kind of comparable to Monster Hunter, in that you kind of go and hunt a monster. It's not as quick or anything. It's not as long, should I say, because you can defeat them pretty quickly. But you have a few different hunt cards, which honestly, those missions, if you're not trying to run around and like explore the whole world, you can probably finish most of them in about 5 minutes. You then obviously have the slightly wider story beats with the exploration aspect, so you do get to see the world. Like I do really like. That's the thing as well. Like visually speaking, I really love how the game looks.
I don't think that's personally like a problem. Essentially, like the missions can be short. It's just that the content goes down to the weapons and the valor plates and all of that. There's a lot of like reused stuff. There isn't a differentiation between a lot of the valor plate like abilities or even the abilities on the legendary weapons. So like, what is the chase for the content if you're getting kind of like very similar stuff there? Like that deficiency in like variety is is the biggest issue of the game, essentially. Because even if the missions were 5 minutes and you could pop in and get you had a chance of getting one of like X amount of like 6 legendaries and they're all unique, I would still be playing. But right now I felt like I've got my experience out of the game, so I'm kind of like stepped back from the game for a little bit and just been chilling.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely the thing that just before Paradise, I'll throw it to you just 1 second. But I think the Valor Place is definitely one of the things that caught me off guard a little bit, because obviously pre-launch, we obviously followed all the news updates and whatnot, and I, having not had a chance to go hands-on with the game until literally like 2 days before launch, in my mind I'd created this picture that when you have like a Valor Plate, like your Archon mode will almost be kind of like a Destiny comparable super, where every single kind of Valor Plate will be quite unique. And then when I sort of saw the full lineup and realized that really it's broken into 3 core categories: either Valor Plates that drop totems, valor plates that summon spectral warriors, or valor plates that dish out elemental waves, you then suddenly realize that your desire to kind of chase too many of them outside of that point definitely diminished a little bit. But Paradise, sorry, to kind of throw back to you.
Yeah, so I just thought I would say that this is a lot of people's first next-gen experience on like the PlayStation 5, right? And for a console generation where you're promised like these SSD speeds, this like next-gen experience, like visually the game's really good and it ticks the boxes there.
Yeah.
But you have instanced maps, so there's load screens constantly. Even if they're quick, there isn't that seamless experience. And then when you're in the map, you have to be like holding B to jump up something or holding B to dash to the next like teleport spot, and you have to do that constantly, so you're always disruptive and you can't really feel like you're moving through the map really fluidly, which is what I would expect out of a next gen experience. And I'm someone with 800 hours in Warframe back when the game was in beta, and I do feel like there's a lot of correlations with Warframe to Godfall in that you have these valor plates, like in Warframe you have all the different frames, and the map kind of structure is the same, where you have a sort of tile set that takes you through the map. In Warframe, I'm pretty sure it was randomized when I played, whereas in Godfall it seems like they're all set, like it's a set map.
It is.
So for a game like Warframe that's free and at this point pretty old now, I think they did some things better than Godfall, which I feel is a real sort of letdown, because in, like you say, the valor plates in Godfall, they're all very samey, and you don't have that experience where you pop your ultimate and you feel sick and unique and you've just done a big flashy move. You have, you know, like you say, they're all set with the same sort of ultimate moves where it summons the spectral warriors or whatnot, or the turrets, whereas in Warframe you have sort of the same concept of these frames, but everything feels unique and you even have like abilities and stuff. So from that side of things, I was definitely disappointed, and I think a lot of people will be disappointed that they're not really getting that fluid, seamless next-gen experience, and some of the things that are in the game that make it exciting, which for me is the valor plates and the idea of having loads of different characters with loads of different builds. You don't really get that feeling of uniqueness, and so you won't, at least I think you won't be spending that time investing in a build for every single valor plate, because they're all kind of samey. And in the end, at the end game, you really only have, in my experience, 2, 3, 4 choices of valor plates based around sort of the legendary items and what builds you can actually make.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that is one of the things. I mean, it's something that I, you know, obviously I don't know what their development plans are and stuff. Like, I would like to think that potentially that could be something that they could like look to improve in the future, because I'm sure you could definitely like differentiate them better. You know, you could sort of see like balance changes and reworks and whatnot, because yeah, like visually, like the valor plates look incredibly awesome. Like, especially when I first set foot in the Sanctum and I walked around and I was like, these are the plates that I hadn't seen just yet. And I was like, oh, I really want to check these ones out, and I want to have them all. Like, I want to be like, you know, like from a completionist point of view, I was, even before I started playing the game, I was like, I'm going to get all the valor plates, and like now I'm just like, I've got the ones that I like, and I'm like, I don't feel like I need to get the other ones. Like, I'll passively get them as I'm still playing through, because I'm still playing the game, I'm still kind of, you know, grinding my way through and whatnot. So I'll still progressively unlock them, but yeah, definitely the desire to do that, and I think you know, that is incredibly important, because in a game like this, you have like, there's one of two things. They made that conscious choice initially to be like, we're not going to give you visual customization on your character, because they want to do, in a similar way to Warframe, they're going to give you like a plate, right? Which is fair enough. We've seen this in other games before. Your plates basically become your classes. But if that's going to be the case, they need to be hugely different. I feel like the trade-off should have been, if they're not going to be hugely different, then let us have armor pieces so we can at least make them look how we want, because then because that's the kind of two chases in like a loot game, right? You either want to look crazy and like look unique, so you have all those things, or if you do have something that creates a class archetype, you want to make sure that that is like so completely different. So I definitely think that is something that I would like to see them kind of touch on. But
Definitely. I think like, if they're, in general, I don't think many of these like loot games get this correct. Like the exotics and armor and stuff need to create like, be so game changing that you essentially need to play around that piece of gear that you've been given, essentially. So that you can make a build around that, and you can just feel powerful in your playstyle. If there's a crit build, you better go double down on that crit and make sure that like you've got crits and like attack speed popping off every 2 seconds. If there's a poison build, you're building around that poison, and that is your build that you're going around, or you can maybe make a hybrid build or something like that. But I feel like a load of looter games that have come out recently have failed on doing this, making those builds feel like unique, and the legendary weapons or exotic weapons feel like they're like just god tier when they drop and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I will say one thing that I did like it's like a kind of like a plus and a minus sort of thing. Like you definitely were right, 261, when you mentioned earlier that like the pursuit of legendaries. Like we do know that obviously in some of the endgame stuff, and we'll touch on that in a minute. Like the endgame Ascended Tower does have its own unique legendaries, but outside of that, there isn't as much of a focus chase, because it's always that difficulty where some games do it where you can farm a particular boss, for example, to get like a boss drop, and other times you can just get loot from anywhere. Division did this. Like they made a change at one point where like anything from anywhere, and I feel like when you spread your loot out too much, that almost makes it harder to chase, like, or to kind of want to chase things.
Yeah.
But one thing I will say that I did like about the loot system was that I do like the idea that you can take a weapon you like early on and you can bring it with you. I think that is kind of like it respects your time in that respect, because one of the things that the way that I've sort of like been looking at like reframing Godfall now, given the way that I've been playing it, is that it is definitely a loot game that, whether it was their intention or not, but it is a loot game that almost you can play casually. Like a lot of loot games, they consume your life, right? You need to be playing them all the time, like thousands of hours. I feel like like Godfall can offer that loot experience in a kind of more casual manner. Like you can drop in for like 20 minutes, get some legendaries, or get something, kind of sort of feel cool about it. And the nice thing is you can then go to the forge and you can enchant your weapon to raise it up to a legendary status and then upgrade it. So maybe in some respects, some people might say, well, that takes the magic away. But then on the flip side, it kind of gives you that freedom where like you don't feel like you're being thrown bajillions of wasted items. You're like, oh, you know what, I get this. Like in so many loot games, you're like, I got this green sword, let me just not even look at it, I'm going to delete it. Instead, like just yesterday, I needed a hammer for my breach build, and I was like, well, I had a green hammer that actually had a perk I liked, and then I pushed it up to legendary. So I do like that aspect of the loot system. I think it kind of like respects your time more so, but it definitely, in some respects, it then takes away the depth and the desire to play for too long.
For sure.
Well, just to jump in on that point, you can do that, and it will let you bring that weapon along with you for the next couple levels. But you will very quickly find that even with a fully enchanted, upgraded green or blue or purple, it will still fall off after a couple levels. So you can do that, and especially as a casual player, that will be really good. But when you start getting into like the level 30, 40, 50, you're not really going to actually be doing that, because it just doesn't keep up with your drops as you get more and more powerful. But the whole system around enchanting is good. I would have liked to seen a re-roll system as well.
Yeah.
The game is about loot farming. It's about the perks you get on the weapons. It's about making a build. Like you say, you've got Hinterclaw, who is an entirely crit-focused Valor plate, which I think is really cool. But you're not going to get the most out of him or make a really good build unless you get multiple god rolls for crit damage, crit chance, attack speed, for example. And without a reroll capability, you're looking at one of those endless grinds of just going in, getting loot, going out, getting loot, until you hit that roll, because there is no way to reroll. There's only a way to upgrade, which is nice and is good, but it's not like in a loot game, I really want a reroll system, no matter what's going on.
100%.
I feel like every time we play a loot game, I'm like,
where's the reroll
can we
system?
reroll it?
Yeah, definitely.
But that isn't to say there isn't really good things about the game. The game is visually really nice. I think the aesthetic of the game is one that you see rarely, and is one that is really, really cool, and I would like to see more of. And the art design, the animations and stuff that I've seen were really, really cool, and I thought they did a really good job. The Valor plates look really, really cool. The combat, while a bit clunky, is really satisfying and really shines at Endgame, but there are quite a few things that are like blockers along the way. One of which that I have to point out now, because I don't want to forget, is the waypoint system, because we've experienced this waypoint system quite a lot, and it essentially tells you where to go. You have no mini-map, so you have to follow the waypoint, which has a distance and sort of tells you go like this left path, or go this right path, or go backwards or forwards. And if you're familiar with Monster Hunter and the scout flies, you'll know that the scout flies, sometimes they send you on some wild goose chase around the forest. And this, I never thought, I'm sorry to say it, I never thought that I would say there was a system worse than scout flies, but the waypoint system, every single mission we've been in has been sending us across the map in the wrong direction.
I wouldn't say every single mission. A lot.
I would say it's a majority though, right?
I'd say it's
Half
like
and half,
50-50.
yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
To be fair.
Well,
Paradise just
maybe I'm
traumatized by the
fixating on it.
experience.
I'm
Fully
traumatized.
traumatized.
I just, you load into a mission, you spend a few minutes running one direction to realize that now you're like 1,500 meters away from the objective when you thought you were going the right way because you're following the waypoint. I really hope that they patch the waypoint in some way because it's such a core part of the gameplay since you don't have that map or that mini map.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about one of the things, and like Vest, maybe you can kind of talk about this because obviously you guys have been grinding a little bit more than me because I was kind of like progressing through solo, so I'm only just kind of approaching that bit now. But like the end game, right? We obviously know that end game is basically broken down into an ascended tower, which is like the tower you experience. For anyone that hasn't played, the tower is basically like you go in, you go up a lift, you fight some enemies, then you pick a door that you can go into, you fight some more enemies, and you continue basically working your way up the tower. When you play it through the single player campaign, or sorry, just through the regular campaign, this tower has a maximum level of 10, but then when you get to endgame, you get to an ascended tower, which has infinite level, infinite scaling, and you also have dreamstones. So Vest, touch on this a little bit, just kind of like how like endgame is definitely one of those things that is lacking a little bit, right?
A bit, yeah. So it's interesting, as you say, Endgame's kind of split into these two activities right now, and I want to start with the tower, if that's okay. So a point I was going to make just before was essentially, in some aspects, because this isn't like, a games as a service game, or it's not supposed to be, I sort of kind of compare this to Diablo in some cases, which I guess is a games as a service game because they're constantly updating it and it's crazy, but a specific mode in Diablo is the kind of like seasonal stuff. And one thing I really like about it is it has that really, just touching on one of your earlier points, it has that really kind of casual appeal in that you can kind of just jump in at any point and not have to worry about, oh, I missed this season, or I haven't been playing, I'm behind or anything like that. It's just kind of like you can jump in, you can get your loot, you can make a build, and you're having fun. And that's kind of the thing that I wanted from Godfall. And the Ascended Tower is kind of perfect for that, right? Like the idea is that you make these builds much like the Ascended Rifts from Diablo, if any of you guys are familiar with it. And your goal is to kind of get as far as you can with this, very powerful, ultra powerful build that you've made. But there's kind of several issues with that. Obviously, as we were kind of talking about, loot-wise, the sort of diversity on the legendaries to make a build can be quite sort of like stifling in that respect, because they've been, I would say, fairly safe with their legendaries. There's not been anything like too crazy. There's a couple that are standout. But more to the tower itself, you've essentially got this, this never-ending scaling tower that I don't know, because of the lack of build diversity, I almost found that we couldn't really get super far in the tower. And I think what they should really be doing is allowing us to kind of, just taking the training wheels off, allowing us to make these super powerful builds, so we can really like test our stuff in the tower. I feel like the tower's kind of almost like wasted potential because of that. As for Dreamstones, I like the idea behind them. I think they're really cool. You essentially fight a couple bosses, do a couple encounters to reveal the weaknesses of this kind of main encounter, which then allows you to actually farm loot. It's the best sort of way to farm loot, because it tells you exactly what you're going to get. So, sometimes you'll get a legendary longsword, or you'll get like, it will specifically call out what you're going to get, which can be really useful. But yeah, even there, it's like, again, the scaling is sort of like, we found it was quite frustrating, right, guys? Like, some of the bosses, especially, I can't remember what he's called.
Solaris
Exalted, that's him. Like, he was literally like, it took us so long to beat him, just because the way he's designed is he has, very big sweeping attacks. He puts fire on the ground everywhere. And at these kind of levels that Dreamstones and stuff are scaling to, they actually scale above the max level of 50. That fire will just instantly kill you. And it's like, there's nothing you can do about that. He's just standing in the fire. If you want to get damage on him, you have to step into the fire. And it's just sort of like, I feel like some of the design elements there could have maybe been like tuned or like tweaked a little bit to maybe make like a better experience. I don't know if you guys want to jump in and give your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, so that is one of the few bosses where you go in and you have like in a boss arena, right? And it's a particular arena made for that boss. He's kind of like, he's one of the few big bosses that isn't out in the world. And he has a mechanic where he's shielded. He has 3 phases. He gets his shield back in each phase. He's constantly doing big AoE attacks, whether it's the huge fire, whether it's the super amazing tracking that like
ion
drops
cannon.
fire bombs on
Yeah.
you, and they track you so well. It's really hard to dodge. And the fight as a whole is like really cool and thematic, but it was a bit mad that he's always stood in fire that kills you super quick. He always has a shield up. You got to break the shield down slowly, get his health down. He goes into the next phase. The final phase is even harder. He gets like another fire orb thing that shoots fire at you every few seconds. And so I think the fight was cool. I just think that there needed to be a cooldown on his moves. Like it was just it was constant fire at you.
Totally.
In a way, that was the most challenging like boss in the game actually, which is pretty interesting.
Considering he's the first one, totally. And one small kind of quick thing, if we just quickly flip-flap back to the tower, that I just forgot to mention was, just on that kind of point I was making about sort of like rewarding the players and, you know, just really like going nuts with it. One thing that we found, I think you will agree, guys, is that, you know, the higher we went in the tower, we didn't feel like we were being rewarded for that. You know, the tower, even the regular tower, when you get to like level 10, like that felt good because in the original tower, you'd usually get like a legendary room, which would guarantee you a legendary out of one of the chests there. But in the Ascended Tower, we found that wasn't the case. Like, you didn't really get anything special. Like, I think out of a few of our good runs, like, we only really we didn't even see any purple rooms, right? No epic rooms. So that was quite a frustrating thing. It felt like, even though we were doing very difficult content, it wasn't as lucrative as just doing the Dreamstones.
Yeah, I don't feel like my time was rewarded
respected,
in the Ascended Tower. Yeah, or respected in the tower, which is because it takes you about 10 to half an hour to get up to like level 10 in that Ascended Tower, right? So yeah, that half an hour just green gear the whole time, and we got to like level 15, like, and that was us trying with like some builds and stuff. We didn't get like higher than that. I don't know if people got some sick builds out there and they're just stomping. But I found like the Dreamstones, you can go in there for like 5 minutes or so and essentially get equivalent gear and better gear in less amount of time.
Guaranteed legendaries in the Dreamstones.
Guaranteed legendaries, and you can kind of like target what you want as well, which is awesome.
I mean, with the tower, we were literally...
And again, in the tower...
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say that, like, even in the tower, you're going up floors collecting keys. You want to save your keys for the good rooms. And if you're only getting green and blue floors, you're like, oh, we'll skip that. I'm not going to open the chest. I'm going to save my keys. Then you get to, like, floor 15. You still haven't got any purple floors. You got, like, 60 keys. And then eventually you die. And then you got literally nothing.
Yeah. And I mean, to add to that, like, floor 15, you're getting one shot there. Like, we're in, like, full build. You know, it's not like we spec'd for health. But, like... we've spec for damage, and it's like we're hardly damaging the enemies at this point. Like, they're one-shotting us. This is clearly the limit of our build. It's nothing to do with like skill or anything, and it's literally just like we didn't get anything for that. We just died. All that time was literally like basically wasted.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't get to use any of
You almost
things.
feel like if they were going to do that, because I do like the concept of the tower. Like, I've played the games like that. You know, just this concept that you kind of just go and go as far as you can. They should almost make it maybe. And again, this, you know, these are sort of things that they could potentially change to maybe solve that issue. They either adjust the floor, like the distribution on the floor levels, or make it so that, you know, once you do finish and you die, before just like completely fading, you just get dropped into like a final treasure room where you can just like spend some of the keys you've got. Then at least you don't feel like you've because I think that's got to be the worst thing. If you spend half an hour and then you're just like, oh, I'm gonna wait for one more floor and then I'm definitely gonna spend my keys, and then you just die and you're like, no, and then you get nothing. Like, that's I think, but again, that's something they could definitely
for sure
definitely address. I think that's the interesting thing to like look at it, because it is one of those things like there are some things. There comes a point where it's like, you know, there's only so much stuff you can like patch in and stuff, but there are definitely some core aspects, some core foundations that are fun in this game, which is why we've kept on playing, and like I still am playing it. You know, like, again, I'm not playing it in the way that I might play a conventional loot game where, you know, you sink like thousands of hours into it. But again, I don't feel like I need to. I feel like sometimes those games can be kind of exhausting. So, but I do find myself still being drawn back to it because I just enjoy jumping in for, say, like, you know, a little bit of time, messing around with the combat, like having a load of fun with it. So I think a lot of those things they could definitely address. You know, they could do some reworks on the Valor plates to give them like unique abilities. They could expand the content pool when they start adding like the DLC. They could make some changes to the tower to kind of make it more rewarding and respectful. So I definitely think some of the things that will keep keep players playing is stuff that could be fixed. So I definitely think
the game could be fixed, but I'm playing through the game and I don't know if I like it or dislike it. That's the crazy thing about it. Like, I'm kind of 50-50, like split right down the middle.
Same.
I was talking to these guys as well playing, and we're like, I like the combat. and I like shout out to your cat.
Shout out to my cat.
I like the combat, and I like the game, and like at the beginning I really didn't like the game, but the more you play it and the more you get to Endgame, I like kind of, I don't know, I come back to it and I'm like, ooh, I want to play more of this. I kind of want to get this loot thing. I kind of want to do this, and I kind of want to do more of this, but I don't know. They've got to. The game feels very superficial at the moment. Like everything on the top and the out, like to look at, looks cool, but there isn't the depth and systems in terms of the content, not the actual mechanics. The mechanics are very in depth. There's like polarity attacks. There's like all the shield attacks. There's rampage. There's all these little systems that go into stuff. Like they just needed to be expanded on, and I just think that I can see what they were going for. They just needed to have. The dev team just needed to not have this crazy world situation going on where everyone's working at home. They need to not have it be launching on like 2 separate platforms, one being a brand new one, which is PS5. And they just probably needed more time and maybe a little bit more budget so that they could execute on this excellent, brilliant idea that they had, basically. Totally. But I just feel like, they can get there if they get some updates out.
Yeah, but definitely.
To expand a little bit on the endgame topic, so Me 26 Vest, all level 50, items, all of our augment slots are filled out. We are, for all intents and purposes, maybe not a min-max best build, but we are all an endgame built Valor plate. And this is where, like the conversation 26 just had, we were like, oh, the game's actually is like quite fun right now. We've got our builds, we feel powerful in our own kind of way. Whereas through the leveling experience, you know, you're dashing through loot, you're leveling up really quickly. But the depth really comes in at endgame when you've got the whole skill tree spec'd out. So you have your ailments popping off. You have all the shield attacks that 26 said. Some of those shield attacks are like a core part of the gameplay that you need to have in order to kill like certain mobs and do certain tricks in the game. One of which is like Captain America shield boomerang, which is one of the visually like coolest skills in the game. You literally boomerang your shield around enemies. If there's a whole crowd, it knocks them all down. Then you can explode it when it returns to you. And so things like that make it super satisfying, as well as like all the elements of your build that go into it and the legendary perks that proc on different requirements. But you don't experience that till right at the end game, which I thought was quite interesting, that when you get there, there is actually that depth and that fun, but you have to get there.
Yeah. What do you think of the game, Alex? What's your final thoughts?
So yeah, I think it's kind of sort of like I said before. Like my final thoughts, I've only just started like dipping into Endgame, so I haven't quite experienced all the stuff that you guys have. But like honestly, throughout the whole thing, I went through a very similar mindset to you, because I pre-launch, I was incredibly excited for it.
You definitely like the game more than me, though.
I definitely do.
You're there. You're like, oh, Godfall.
Well, that's the thing. I'm honestly like this is the thing. Like I'm honestly still having a load of fun with it. Like I'm very much aware of the things there where it is lacking. Like I'm not in any way blind to it. I think it's important for people to like know as well. I'm not like trying to hide anything. Like there's a lot of things that I would like to see improved, and there's a lot of things that I wish they would like add and change and whatnot. But like at the moment, I'm still in that kind of period where I do still enjoy jumping into the game. Like this weekend, for example, we've been super busy making loads of content for like loads of games this week, and then this weekend I had the choice between continuing my Valhalla playthrough, playing like Demon Souls, or playing like Godfall, and I chose to jump into Godfall because I wanted to carry on like playing. So I'm still playing it, still having fun with it, and I think because for me, I always described it, I was chatting to someone the other day, it almost gives me those kind of stress ball vibes in a similar way to Dynasty Warriors. Like Dynasty Warriors games where like sometimes you just want to drop in and you just want to lay waste to a load of enemies, and it just feels super satisfying. It might not necessarily be something you're going to be doing for like the next 10 hours or like the whole day, but I'm still at this stage where I'm getting a lot of enjoyment out of it. So yeah, I think I really want to see, like I think the team behind it are like super passionate, and I really want to see what they can do with it moving forward, because I don't think this is the end. I think it's definitely, they said they've got like a DLC planned. I'm interested to sort of see what they're going to add with that, and I really want to see how they can change it, because I love the foundation of this game. Like I love the feel of the combat. Like there's that smashing things with a hammer is so satisfying. Like that is without question my favorite weapon. Like there's so many things that I just really like about it. I just want to have like that slightly grander experience so that I can then enjoy like every aspect of it. So it's not perfect. But there is fun to be had. It depends. I think the most important thing, if someone's like, is this game going to be for me? I think it's always like, what is your primary reason for playing? Like if you're looking at this as like, I want like a Destiny level like looter that's going to give me thousands of hours, this is not that game. If you're like, oh, I want a game that's got like a super deep story that's going to keep me playing for like 60 hours, it's not that game. But if you're one of those people that like Vess mentioned earlier, like, you know, you like those kind of combat systems, like you're into those kind of melee combat, action combat, and you just want to have a game where you can mess around with a few builds, not necessarily too deep right now because of the limited potential, but still mess around with some builds, mess around with some weapons and just have some fun, then there's definitely fun to be had in the kind of moment-to-moment gameplay. So I'm enjoying it. It's not perfect. It's not going to be like my game of the year, but I've had fun with it.
Cool. I will have to say this because I know people in the comments will be slightly mad if we don't say anything. The fact that the game doesn't have any matchmaking, I do feel like the games play better solo anyway, and you get more XP. There's a bunch of stuff. I just feel like the game functions better as a single player game. We played through co-op and we found out that like halfway through that we could have just been a much higher level just playing like solo in the tower, just having a bunch of fun. But that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, matchmaking was quite surprising. I didn't even realize that because again, obviously, I played because for everyone kind of wondering why we kind of split the way we played. Like, obviously, you can only play as 3 anyway, but I was playing on PS5 and these guys played on PC. So so I did everything solo. So I didn't even realize until people were like, "There's no matchmaking." I'm like, "Wait, what?" Like that is for a game like this. It is. I mean, in these kind of games, you expect matchmaking as a default. You could understand if they say like when they have those difficult raid like endgame activities, like, oh, there's not going to be matchmaking for raids. All right, I get that, but like that should be a bog standard for everything, right? So that is definitely a big miss. And again, hopefully, I don't know. I'm not a technical designer. I don't know where you draw the line. Whether like this is stuff that can be fixed, this is stuff that needs a fundamental game version 2. But like maybe they could put matchmaking in.
I know we've already said this as well, but I really like the theme and the art and the way that things look in this game. I really want more games that are themed like this. It's so grandiose. You have like everything's kind of gilded and it looks really great, and the battle plates all look really cool. And I want more games with this style, with this aesthetic. And I think shout out to the art director, to the people that are doing all the modeling and stuff. Visually, it's really, really cool.
And musically
definitely.
well. I'm not gonna lie, music was great.
Yeah. Yes, there's so definitely. So I think there's definitely some great aspects to it. It's just definitely not quite there right now. So maybe
can I
sure.
add one thing though? If a dev is listening to this, could you just add a little bit of music to that end cutscene for me, please?
Oh yeah.
We won't spoil anything, guys, but there's an end cutscene, and I really hope if you have the game, play to the end, get the end cutscene. I want to know if you guys have the same cutscene that we did.
Maybe you guys had a bug.
Possibly.
Yeah, true. Maybe we had a bug. But it made us chuckle, and it was like it actually made the game fun basically. That
Shout out
was
to the town.
Nice.
cool.
But right. So I think for the time being, I think that's a kind of a good way to like wrap it up, because obviously we've been chatting for quite a while. But I know a lot of you guys, want to sort of like know what we've been thinking. A lot of you guys, like myself, we've been sort of like watching this game pre-launch, trying to work out and whatnot. So hopefully this has sort of answered some questions. Definitely, regardless, like it's one to watch, even if you're in a position where you're like, all right, maybe I'm not going to jump in just yet. I'm really keen to sort of see what they do. Because with any game these days, like a game launches and that's just the beginning, right? So I'm really interested to sort of see. They've already put out like a patch to address some like basic issues, so they're clearly working pretty hard on it already. So I am very keen to sort of see what they do moving forward, and hopefully, once we get into kind of like into the new year and they start approaching the second DLC, we can maybe get a picture as to like how they're going to expand things, and they might flesh out the experience. So either way, that's our thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Any questions, drop them down below. Of course, keep it locked for plenty more, and thanks guys for joining me.
Have a good one.
Cool, man.
Bye.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget, if you haven't already done so, you can join the Arekkz Gaming Discord. We've got an awesome community over there with so many different channels for you to chat loads of different topics and different games. I'm in there, the team's in there. If you guys want to chat with us, find people to play with, it's just in general a great place to be. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads.